Igor Kostin stood on the roof of Reactor 3, his makeshift lead apron already feeling inadequate against the invisible enemy that surrounded him. The dosimeter, clipped to his chest, clicked like an angry insect. So fast the clicks merged into a steady scream. He had 3 minutes, maybe less. Below his feet, scattered like deadly confetti, lay chunks of graphite and nuclear fuel thrown from the exploded Reactor 4 just meters away. Each piece glowed with radiation levels that would kill an unprotected person in minutes. The robots sent to clear this roof had lasted hours at best before their circuits fried. Now it was down to humans, bio-robots, as they'd been grimly nicknamed. 90 seconds, shouted the supervisor through a megaphone from behind a concrete barrier. Igor's shovel, a simple garden spade wrapped in plastic, felt absurdly primitive for the task. He scooped up a chunk of graphite that had once moderated nuclear reactions inside the reactor core. It was surprisingly light, like charcoal. He flung it over the edge of the roof, into the gaping wound where Reactor 4 had been. 1 piece down, hundreds to go. The lead boots made each step laborious, the respirator fogged with his panicked breathing. Through the eye holes of his rubber hood, he could see other men working with desperate efficiency, their movements robotic, mechanical. No one spoke. Speaking wasted precious seconds. 2 minutes! His body didn't feel different yet, but Igor knew what was happening at the cellular level. Gamma rays were punching through his DNA like bullets through paper, scrambling genetic code that had taken billions of years to perfect. Every second on this roof took days, maybe weeks, off his life. A piece of fuel rod lay near his feet, a metallic cylinder that had once held uranium pellets. He knew he shouldn't, but he picked it up with his gloved hands. It was warm, not from the explosion 6 months ago, but from its own decay. He was holding the heart of a nuclear reactor, the same force that powered the sun, condensed into something he could grip. 3 minutes! Get off the roof! Igor threw the fuel assembly over the edge and ran, as much as one could run in lead boots, toward the stairwell. 3 minutes on the roof of hell. 3 minutes that would define the rest of his life, however long that might be. He was 22 years old. The disaster at Chernobyl nuclear power plant on April 26, 1986, created an unprecedented crisis. The explosion had thrown chunks of the reactor core, graphite moderator blocks, fuel assemblies, control rods, onto the roofs of the adjacent buildings. These pieces of nuclear shrapnel turned the rooftops into some of the most radioactive places on Earth. The radiation levels varied across different sections of the roof, designated by scientists with grimly practical names. Area M had radiation levels of about 500 Roentgens per hour. Area N measured 2,000 Roentgens per hour. But the worst was Area K, directly adjacent to the destroyed reactor, where radiation peaked at an incomprehensible 10,000 Roentgens per hour. To put this in perspective, 500 Roentgens absorbed over 5 hours is a lethal dose for humans. On Area K, you'd receive that dose in 3 minutes. Initially, the Soviet authorities tried to use remote-controlled robots to clear the debris. They brought in specialized machines from across the Soviet Union and even acquired advanced robots from West Germany. The STR-1 robots, designed for lunar exploration, were repurposed for the roof. But the radiation was beyond anything the engineers had anticipated. It fried circuitry, jammed mechanisms, and confused electronic sensors. One by one, the robots failed. General Nikolai Tarakanov, who oversaw the cleanup operation, watched the last robots sputter and die on the roof through binoculars. He turned to his aide and spoke the words that would seal the fate of thousands. "We will have to use people." The call went out across the Soviet Union for volunteers. They needed young, healthy men, preferably those who hadn't yet had children, though this grim criterion was often ignored. They were called liquidators, tasked with liquidating the consequences of the disaster. Sergei Volodin was working in a factory in Kiev when the military recruiters arrived. "They didn't really explain what we'd be doing," he recalled years later. "They said it was our patriotic duty, that the motherland needed us. They mentioned Chernobyl, but I think none of us really understood what that meant." The recruits were promised bonuses, 2 years' salary for a few weeks' work, and were told they would be heroes. Many volunteered out of genuine patriotism. Others were essentially conscripted, given little choice in the matter. They came from all walks of life: factory workers, students, collective farmers, even some scientists who understood exactly what they were walking into, but came anyway. Alexander Fedotov, a 20-year-old conscript, remembered the bus ride to Chernobyl. At first, we were almost excited, like we were going on an adventure. We sang songs, shared cigarettes. But as we got closer, the mood changed. We started seeing evacuated villages, empty houses with laundry still on the lines. Then we saw the reactor in the distance, or what was left of it. The singing stopped. The liquidators arrived at Chernobyl to find a world turned upside down. The explosion had transformed a modern nuclear facility into something from a nightmare. The destroyed Reactor 4 was shrouded in smoke and steam, its twisted metal and concrete innards exposed like a giant wound. And everywhere, on roofs, in courtyards, scattered across the grounds, lay pieces of the reactor's radioactive core. The men were housed in camps hastily constructed outside the exclusion zone. Each morning, they would board buses for the journey to the plant, watching their dosimeters climb steadily as they approached ground zero. Training for the roof cleaning operation was brief and surreal. Behind the power plant, Soviet engineers had constructed a full-scale mock-up of the reactor roof, using wooden planks and painted markers to indicate where the most dangerous debris was likely to be. The recruits would practice their movements over and over, learning to work with maximum efficiency. They made us rehearse like it was a ballet, remembered Viktor Brukhanov, no relation to the plant director. Pick up the debris, take no more than 5 steps, throw it over the edge. Don't stop to look. Don't try to be careful. Speed is safety. The protective equipment was improvised and inadequate. The liquidators wore lead aprons fashioned from sheets of lead 2 to 4 millimeters thick. Some men made their own from lead sheets scavenged from medical X-ray rooms. They had lead plates to cover their groins and lead sheets bent into crude helmets. The boots were regular rubber boots with lead sheets inserted into the soles. The entire ensemble could weigh up to 30 kilograms, 66 pounds. The lead was supposed to protect us, said Anatoly Shapov. But we knew it was like wearing sunglasses in front of a nuclear explosion. It might help a little, but not much. The respirators were often simple gauze masks or rubber gas masks that fogged up immediately in the heat and exertion. Many men removed them, choosing clear vision over protection from radioactive dust, a devil's bargain that would haunt many of them. Each man was issued a personal dosimeter, though many suspected these devices were tampered with to show lower readings. The official limit was 25 Röntgen's total exposure, but in the chaos and urgency of the cleanup, accurate record-keeping was often impossible. Dr. Angelika Baranova, one of the few female medical officers at the site, tried to monitor the men's health. We did blood tests before and after each shift on the roof. We could see the white blood cell counts dropping in real time. These men were being cellularly destroyed, and we could measure it happening, but we couldn't stop it. The debris had to be cleared. The night before their first shift on the roof, many liquidators wrote letters home, though they were forbidden from describing what they were actually doing. "Dear Mother," wrote 19-year-old Pavel Kudryavtsev, "I am well and doing important work for the state. Don't worry about me. The food is good and I've made friends. I'll see you soon." He didn't mention that soon depended on surviving the most dangerous job in the world. The first teams of bio-robots began their work in September 1986, 5 months after the explosion. Each shift started before dawn, with medical checks and equipment distribution. The men would suit up in their lead aprons, looking like medieval knights preparing for battle against an invisible dragon. The work was organised with military precision. Teams of 8 to 10 men would go up together. Each man had a specific section of roof to clear and a strictly timed task. Most were allowed only 90 seconds to 3 minutes on the roof, depending on the radiation levels in their assigned area. Nikolai Kaplan described his first time on the roof. The elevator ride up was the worst part, knowing what was coming. When the doors opened, it was strangely quiet. I expected to hear something, to feel something, but radiation is silent. The only sound was the crunch of graphite under our boots and our own breathing. The debris varied in danger. The graphite blocks, used to moderate the nuclear reaction, were highly radioactive but relatively safe to handle with shovels. The fuel assemblies were worse, concentrated uranium that delivered massive doses even through the protective equipment. Worst of all were the pieces of the control rods, made of boron carbide, which had absorbed enormous amounts of radiation during their time in the reactor. We had to make decisions in split seconds, recalled Mikhail Petrov. Is that piece of metal worth picking up? Or is it so radioactive it'll use up my entire time allowance? Can I throw this over the edge? Or is it too heavy and I'll waste precious seconds? Every choice could mean the difference between 25 Röntgens and 50. The physical sensation of extreme radiation exposure varied among the men. Some reported a metallic taste in their mouths, the taste of radiation ionizing their saliva. Others felt a tingling on exposed skin, like a severe sunburn developing in real time. A few claimed they could see flashes of light when they closed their eyes, Cherenkov radiation occurring in the fluid of their eyeballs. One of the most dangerous jobs was clearing the ventilation stacks, where pieces of fuel had lodged in hard-to-reach places. Vladimir Shevchenko volunteered for this task. Someone had to do it. The fuel was sitting up there, radiating down on everyone below. I climbed up with a pole, trying to knock it loose. I was up there for maybe 5 minutes. 5 minutes that probably took 10 years off my life. The psychological pressure was immense. The men knew that every second on the roof was damaging them at the molecular level. Some dealt with it through dark humour. They called themselves the roof cats and joked about glowing in the dark. Others worked in grim silence, focused only on the task at hand. Between shifts, the liquidators would gather in their camps, sharing vodka, which they believed, incorrectly, helped combat radiation, and stories. They formed intense bonds, brothers in an impossible war against physics itself. We all knew we were dead men walking, said Alexei Ananenko, one of the liquidators. The question was whether we'd die in a year, 5 years, or 10. So we lived intensely in those moments. Every cigarette, every laugh, every sunrise might be one of our last. By October 1986, over 3,000 men had worked on the roofs of Chernobyl. Each had spent only minutes in the most radioactive areas, but those minutes would define the rest of their lives. The immediate effects of radiation exposure began appearing within days. Many liquidators experienced severe fatigue, nausea, and headaches, classic signs of radiation sickness. Their white blood cell counts plummeted, leaving them vulnerable to infections. Some developed burns on exposed skin that wouldn't heal properly. Igor Kostin, the photographer who had also worked as a liquidator, documented both the cleanup and its aftermath. At first, we felt like heroes. We had done something no one else could do. But then people started getting sick, really sick. Acute radiation syndrome struck the most exposed workers within weeks. Their bone marrow stopped producing blood cells. Their digestive systems began to fail. Hair fell out in clumps. Some recovered partially, others died within months. But it was the long-term effects that proved most insidious. Thyroid cancer rates among the liquidators skyrocketed. Leukemia appeared at rates far above normal. Cardiovascular diseases, cataracts, and psychological disorders plagued the survivors. Dr. Valentina Drozd, who treated liquidators at Hospital No. 6 in Moscow, observed patterns that haunted her. Young men in their 20s and 30s were developing diseases we typically saw in 70-year-olds. Their bodies were aging at an accelerated rate. The radiation had fundamentally damaged their cellular repair mechanisms. The psychological trauma was equally severe. Many liquidators developed what psychologists termed Chernobyl syndrome, a combination of post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and anxiety, compounded by the constant fear of radiation-induced illness. Sergei Volodin struggled with nightmares for years. I would dream I was back on the roof, but I couldn't move. The radiation was visible, like golden snow falling all around me, and I was frozen, just watching it accumulate on my skin. Families were affected too. Wives watched their husbands deteriorate. Children were born with higher rates of birth defects. The genetic damage from radiation exposure could be passed to the next generation, yet the Soviet government initially downplayed these health effects. Official reports minimized casualties and denied long-term consequences. It wasn't until the fall of the Soviet Union that the true scale of the sacrifice began to emerge. Anatoly Shapov fought for years for recognition and medical care. They called us heroes when they needed the work done. Afterward, we became an embarrassment, living proof of the disaster they wanted to forget. As the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, so did much of the support system for the liquidators. Promised pensions evaporated, medical care became sporadic. Many liquidators found themselves fighting bureaucracies in newly independent nations for recognition of their service and its consequences. The exact number of liquidators who died as a result of their exposure remains disputed. Official Soviet figures claimed only 31 deaths directly attributable to Chernobyl, but organizations representing the liquidators estimate thousands have died prematurely from radiation-induced illnesses. We weren't just fighting radiation, reflected Alexander Fedotov years later. We were fighting forgetting. The world wanted to move on from Chernobyl, but we couldn't. It was in our blood, our bones, our DNA. Some liquidators became activists, fighting for recognition and support for their fellow survivors. They organized associations, held memorial services, and worked to document their experiences before it was too late. Viktor Brukhanov became a spokesperson for liquidator rights. We saved Europe from a worse catastrophe. If we hadn't cleared that roof, if the radiation had continued to spread, half of Europe could have become uninhabitable. But who remembers us now? International recognition came slowly. The International Atomic Energy Agency acknowledged the liquidators' sacrifice, but often downplayed the health impacts, leading to bitter disputes with survivor organizations. In 2006, on the 20th anniversary of the disaster, Ukraine finally unveiled a monument to the liquidators in Kiev. The statue depicts workers in protective gear, their faces showing determination mixed with fear. At its base, an inscription reads, "To those who saved the world." But for many liquidators, the monument came too late. Thousands had already died, many in poverty and obscurity. Others continued to suffer from chronic illnesses, their bodies still fighting a war that began with those few minutes on a radioactive roof. In 2019, 33 years after the disaster, I met Igor Kostin in a small apartment in Kiev. He was one of the few roof liquidators still alive and willing to talk about his experience. His hands shook slightly as he poured tea, a result, he said, of neurological damage from radiation exposure. "People ask me if I regret it," he said, staring out the window at the city he helped save. "How can I regret it? Someone had to do it. If not us, then who? Maybe younger men, maybe men with families who had more to lose than we did." He showed me photographs from his time at Chernobyl, images of men in inadequate protection facing an invisible enemy, of graphite blocks scattered like pieces of death, of exhausted faces trying to smile for the camera. "We knew the danger," Igor continued. "Maybe not the exact numbers, the precise doses, but we knew. You could feel it in the air, taste it. We knew we were trading our futures for everyone else's, and most of us made peace with that." He pulled out a worn notebook filled with names. "These are my friends from the roof," he said, flipping through pages. Sergei died 1991, leukemia. Mikhail, 1995, heart failure. Alexander, 2003, liver cancer. The list went on, name after name, each with a date, each representing a life cut short. "But you know what?" Igor looked up, his eyes still bright despite everything. "We did it. We cleaned the roof. We contained the disaster. Every person living in Europe today who doesn't have to worry about radiation in their food, in their water, in their children's playground, they're living that life because we picked up shovels and went onto that roof." As I left his apartment, Igor called after me. "Tell them we weren't heroes. Heroes have a choice. We just did what needed to be done. Tell them we were ordinary men who spent a few minutes in an extraordinary hell. And tell them it was worth it." Igor Kostin died 6 months after our interview, at age 53. His death certificate listed the cause as multiple organ failure related to radiation exposure. He was buried with full honours, one of the last of the roof cats, the bio-robots who traded their health for the world's safety. The roof of Chernobyl is now covered by the new safe confinement structure, a massive steel arch designed to contain the radiation for the next 100 years. Underneath that arch, pieces of graphite and fuel might still lie in corners and crevices, too dangerous to retrieve even today. They remain as monuments to both human folly and human sacrifice, and to the men who faced the atom with nothing but lead aprons and garden shovels, and won. Their victory came at an incalculable cost, measured not in rubles or dollars but in years stolen, in dreams deferred, in children never born. They were liquidators not just of radioactive debris, but of their own futures, sacrificed on the altar of necessity. Today, as the world grapples with nuclear power's role in combating climate change, the story of the Chernobyl liquidators serves as both warning and inspiration. It warns us of the awesome responsibility that comes with harnessing the atom. But it also inspires, showing that in humanity's darkest hour, ordinary people can rise to extraordinary sacrifice. The bio-robots of Chernobyl were not willing heroes. They were conscripts in a war against physics itself, armed with inadequate protection and impossible courage. They stood on the most dangerous rooftop in the world and did what needed to be done, not for glory or recognition, but because someone had to. Their legacy is not just in the contained disaster or the lessons learned about nuclear safety. It's in the proof that humans, when faced with the unthinkable, can think. When faced with the impossible, can act. When faced with certain sacrifice, can still choose to save others. The roof of Chernobyl has been cleaned, but the memory of those who cleaned it must never be swept away.